Welcome to heCast, the official podcast of He Changed It. As always, I am Mike Chisholm. As always, I am stoked to be here. Very much so. I love the vantage point I get for the He Changed It universe. I get to host the podcast. I get to watch as very, very talented people, way more talented than me, build this men's mental wellness playground that is being built. This is your first episode of heCast, welcome. We're happy to have you here. If you've already been part of the He Changed It universe, thank you very, very much for supporting everything that we're doing. You're probably just like me, very excited. I don't know if you saw the bell. Let's Talk has been giving us some love and promoting us. Canadian Mental Health, the vulnerability course is in the app right now. If you haven't downloaded He Changed It yet, go to HeChangedIt.com, get the He app for the Google in the Google store and for the Apple in the Apple store. Come grab it. Also, if you haven't subscribed or shared this podcast, what the heck, please, the overlords of He Changed It are always looking at metrics. If you wouldn't mind subscribing, leaving us a rating, sharing the podcast, we would appreciate that. We've got some great things coming in early 2022, some amazing announcements coming down the pipe, both from the app and from the podcast. We are stoked about this. We want to move the needle when it comes to mental wellness, when it comes to men, how we live our lives, and the resources, the tools in our toolkit, as we like to say. Very excited about today's guest. From a personal standpoint, okay, this is a guy that I have watched over a decade, almost 15 years. I've watched this guy from a fairly close proximity. And I have the guy that we're about to have on this podcast today, I would say of all the people that I know personally, has transformed his life through studious personal development, more so than any man that I have ever met. We talk about a lot of the personal development shorthands that get left when we read these books or have these moments. One of those shorthands is success leaves clues. This is a guy that leaves, not only has he built his life and changed his life from where he was, say 15, 20 years ago to where he is now. He's built this amazing business, multiple six-figure business with a beautiful family, and has really stayed rooted. He has done that just through, in my opinion, being studious about personal development, taking it seriously, 1 foot at a time, little decisions that have led to an amazing life. Don't get me wrong, not a perfect life, but an amazing life. One where when things go wrong, there's a lot of options in the tool chest to deal with some of those things. His name is Bert Bruneau. He lives in Calgary, Alberta, Canada, and he has graciously given us some of his very precious time, because his time is very precious between his family and his business, and has agreed to let me leverage our personal dynamic and be on the show today. So Bert Bruneau, thank you for taking time out of your very busy day to be on heCast today.
Hey, Mike, it is my pleasure to being on, and pleasure to spend some time with you and have these great conversations. So looking forward to it.
Thank you very much for that. I want to basically put it into a nutshell. You're a dude who used to work in the oil field, decided you didn't want to be that guy, and did a full stop 180-degree turn and have completely changed your life. And as they say in the Heath Ledger movie A Knight's Tale, you changed your stars. Is that a fair statement to make?
Yeah, I mean, my life and my journey has not been a whole lot different than a lot of people's. I mean, the thing is this, I think really deep down inside, if I look back at my life and my career, or where I began, and, I came from a farm, and then to Alberta, worked in the oil and gas industry, working in an environment that wasn't very pleasant. You're never home, worked in dangerous, harsh conditions, and, very miserable environment. But I think it was a point where, and I think that when I look at my life, I was just at a point of desperation, a point of such a level of dissatisfaction that I wanted to do something, different with my life. And I was in a very unhappy place. and going down a path that I would say was not a pleasant or a good path, right? And so, when you want change, though, so sometimes it comes in mysterious ways. It just kind of comes unexpectedly, and it's just taking advantage of it. But I was at a point where I just needed something different in my life, and consciously made a decision to do something different, which has led me down a path that sometimes I wake up, Mike, I'll be honest, it's like you wake up, it's like, how did I ever end up here? Right? Like, I think we all experience these things. Either it's in a good way or it could also be in a bad way, right? How did you end up here? It all comes down to certain choices that we make. So, but yes, like, truly blessed, and, thanks for those kind words. But I mean, life is a journey of ups and downs. It's not all sunshine and rainbows, as they put it. Right. So.
Absolutely. And I mean, you know what? Not a perfect life, but a life that has a lot of experiences in it. I mean, I think about some of the experiences you have had, since making this decision, since moving onto this path that you have moved to, and you talk about the blessings, but no, none of us have perfect lives. That's the thing. It's just some of us have more options than others when things aren't as perfect. Now I want to go back to that place it was your late 20s that you had that place where you decided that you weren't satisfied, right?
Yeah, it was actually it was in my mid 20s. Exactly, because I had started pursuing a career in the oil and gas industry. And you know how sometimes we don't think about those things. You just come up and, and I see that a lot in people's lives. They kind of start on a career path or start on a journey somewhere, and they don't really think about what they want their future to be like. They just say, oh, I think, I'll go do this. But it's not something that they're passionate about. It's not something that they, that they maybe really like. And some people do it for the wrong reasons. They do it because they just they think they're going to make a lot of money doing it. And maybe that's the case for some people. But I was I was in my mid 20s. I had been working in the oil and gas industry for like 5 years. And I knew very quickly that it's not something I want to do for the rest of my life. Right. And, and I often, and I remember this individual, a mentor of mine, very wealthy individual, asked me, this question when I was at that age. I believe I was like 24 at the time. He says, hey, I mean, do you see yourself retiring doing this? Do you see yourself, and how he put it is, do you see yourself doing this for another 30 years? And I was like, it was an absolute no, right? It was like, there's no way that I want to continue this path. And I started, looking at people around me, and had an interview with my future in regards to people who had been there, 20, 25, 30 years. And man, I didn't like what I saw, it was like, and then, you start reflecting and you start looking at even people in other fields outside of the field that I was in at that time. And many of them are there going through life and, just to pay the bills, collect the paycheck. They're not living for the weekend. And I think, it's like, and I like your podcast, HeCast, because it's all about, mental health. And I think, you get caught in this rat race where you're just going to work, for, just to get by, just to, like I said, pay the bills, living for the weekend. That you got no stimulation, you got no passion, you got no purpose. And when you don't have that, you kind of start reverting to pathways that are maybe not of the healthiest of things, right? Whether it's bad habits or, down a bad path of whether it's with people or, drugs or alcohol and those type of things, right? Yep. And I really think that, when somebody's living with purpose, somebody finds their purpose, finds their passion, finds something that they're excited to go to work at every day. And it's not just about the money. It's about making a greater impact. It's about making a difference. You wake up with a different level of life in you. You wake up with a different, drive, ambition than just going and just punching a time clock, or for a lot of people, it's just a mental clock, right? To get by for the week. And, my journey started at that point where I was, I kind of, opportunities come by us all the time. It's whether we see it or aware of it and take advantage of it. Right. And, I was one of those individuals I can relate to, Sir Richard Branson. He says, if you see an opportunity and you're not sure if it's for you or sure if it's something, and even if you don't know how to do it, and I'm just not quoting him word for word here. He said, just don't think about it, go do it and figure it out as you go along. And that's kind of what I did. Is I knew the path I was on was not the path that I wanted to be on for the rest of my life. So I said, I got to try something different. And, I kind of ventured into this new world, and it was ultimately a world of personal development, for myself. And it got me on a path that, man, it's amazing, what happens when you start to focus, instead of trying to change things all around you, you start to changing yourself.
Yeah.
Then everything around you starts to change. First you change you, then everything around you changes. But that's the problem with a lot of, or challenges, I should say, that people have, is they want everything around them to change, but then they don't want to focus on changing themselves internally. And I think that's where it really begins. That's where it began for me and all the people. I mean, hey, Mike, you've interviewed a lot of people on your podcast. It's a great podcast. And you'll find a common theme. People start, when they look within and start changing themselves, all of a sudden their external world, your external world is nothing more than a reflection of your inner world. So when you start working on your inner world, then everything around you starts to change, right?
Oh man, I love this so much. We're already getting into exactly why I just appreciate you so much. You're able to boil that down to such a simple concept. Now, to answer what you just said, there are definitely two themes that have come up in our podcast more than any other themes. Number one is awareness, and number two is vulnerability. Now, we'll probably get to some vulnerability stuff a little bit later, but awareness, like that mentor who said that to you, like so many times men, and what a blessing that you had this happen in your mid-20s. We've talked to guys in their 40s who have connected all the dots they were told to connect. They went and got that education or that job. They went and got that wife. They got that house. They got those kids, and they just kind of put their head down and went for it. And they never necessarily popped up their head to say, hey, what's my purpose? What do I want to do? What do I want to be? And ask these questions. Do I want to retire at this place? Awareness. Let's go back to that for a second. How grateful are you for that mentor to take that moment to ask that question that made you actually think about what it was you were doing and why you were doing it? And that awareness, which then led to, it was like a keystone coming out of a mountain pass where a little keystone rock gets moved and an entire avalanche is the result of that. That's the catalyst. One little piece of awareness can change everything. And you are living proof of that. Guys who are listening to this that might feel that inkling of being lost or not knowing, it really only takes one decision that can lead to changing your life forever, doesn't it?
Absolutely. I think, the first step to change comes with awareness, right? Like it all begins, in my personal opinion, that's where it spawns from, is aware. It's aware that you have, most people are not aware that they have that control, right? They believe that they're always, somebody else is in control of them, whether it's a boss, a family member, or something along those lines. Meanwhile, the first step is awareness. And I think for things to change, you got to be aware that things need to change. And so that was for me. But at the time it was, I didn't know which direction. I kind of landed into this field, into the field that I'm in and the business that I'm in, by accident. But I saw an opportunity, but what it did for me was my associations. My associations got me thinking differently, right? Associations are so powerful. So once, if you're aware that you need to change and you want something more out of your life, whether it's career, family, whatever that may be, then it starts with that awareness. Then probably the best thing is associations after that. Associating with people that have some of the things that you desire, the things that you want, whether it's lifestyle or whether it's fulfillment or whatever that is, to you. I think associations are so critical. Right. And yes, I'm blessed for the associations in my life, because I don't think that journey would have been the same if I wasn't surrounded with the right people, because there are bad associations, and we are a product of our environment. We are a product of our associations. And so if you surround yourself with people who have no goals, who have no purpose, who have no ambition, and then guess what? You're going to be just a reflection of that environment and those individuals. So if you want something more, the most powerful way of doing it is find somebody who has some of the things that you desire and associate with them on as much as you possibly can. Build those relationships, bring value to them. They will bring value to you, but it's reciprocal, right?
Yeah, I think that's huge. The other piece of the puzzle, and I want to go into this a little bit when it comes to mindset. I'm not talking about necessarily vocation and that everybody should necessarily do this, but I happen to know that one of the other keystones in where you were at was also the idea, and this is something that I learned at the same, I believe I've had that same lesson, is the idea of being an entrepreneur versus an employee. And I mean, you know what? People can say it either way. Some people have great jobs out there. Some people, have great businesses out there. Some people grind it out both ways. But at the end of the day, when I wrapped my head around the idea of being an entrepreneur versus an employee, I also felt that I was wrapping my ideals around the idea of being proactive versus reactive. Being an entrepreneur, to me, seems to be a more proactive way of living life versus being an employee is many times a reactive way. You're reacting to whatever's coming down the pipe from above you because there is always somebody above you. When you're an entrepreneur, you're getting proactive to try and, gain market share, gain, business metrics, that kind of a thing. That also happened to you around the same time, right?
Yeah. I mean, because, I've always truly believed that I wanted to be in control of my future. I just didn't know at that time was what it was. I had clear in my mind, because I grew up on a farm, right? When I grew up, that was my environment, but I never had the desire to really go back into that field, move back, to Central Cam, Manitoba for that. I kind of fell in love with where I was, with Alberta, where I am today. But on the other hand is when you're looking at, for example, kind of how, it all kind of spawned. I believed that I wanted to be in control. I wanted to build equity for something for myself. I wanted, now, Mike, if I'm going to speak openly, is the world of entrepreneurship for everybody? Probably not, right? It takes, a different individual. It takes a different mindset. People like the idea of the entrepreneurship. People love the idea of, for example, I'd love to have more control of my time. I'd love to, do, and the thing is about entrepreneurship, guess what? The sky's the limit. The income's the limit. The net worth is unlimited. There's no limitations. But what people fail to miss is, for example, the work that goes on in being an entrepreneur, right? It is much more daunting. You got to be able to take risks. You got to be able to take stress. You got to be able to take pressure. You got to be able to take a lot of these things that most people never venture into that world because that's the aspect that scares them. That's the aspect that, they, that a lot of people can't maybe handle. Can they handle it? Yeah, but do they want to? There's a difference between that, really wanting what you and going after it versus just, hey, being comfortable, right? The world of entrepreneurship is not for those who want to be comfortable. If people want comfortable, then stay at their jobs, right? Which by the way, there's nothing wrong with that. No, if somebody is actually fully, happy, they're living a fulfilling life and all of this, then absolutely. Not everybody wants to, build millions and things like that. There's more to life than that, but at the end of the day is, it's a different game. And when I ventured into this field, I knew that I kind of came in walking in that, okay, this is going to take, effort. It's going to take determination. It's going to take persistence. It's going to take the mental toughness, the physical toughness, the endurance. But my mindset going into the world of entrepreneurship, and I think a big mistake that people, do is just like what I said earlier. They like that aspect of it, but they don't really know really what it's going to take to achieve those things. So you see, one thing that I've noticed in the world of entrepreneurship is like, and you said it, alluded to it earlier, you got to work more on yourself than anything else. Yeah. Right. And the more you grow this, the way you think, then the greater the chances of you being successful in that field, whatever venture, business that you're in.
Yep.
But most people just never, take that time to grow their mindset, right? And unfortunately, they walk in and they'll say, well, I'll try it out. Well, try equals no commitment.
Yeah.
It's just whenever somebody says try, first thing that comes to me, no commitment. They're going to test it out. Mike, they're
going to dip their toe.
Yeah, they dip their toe into it, right? You ever have those people, for example, in the past, hey, you're having a get together at your place. Hey, you invite somebody over. Yeah, I'll try to make it. Chances are, probably
they don't show up.
Right? You just you can tell that, right? So you see, if you're going to go into the world of entrepreneurship, it's going to take your absolute all. It's going to take your absolute best. It's going to take going through the good, the bad, the ugly, all of it. But I'll tell you, you walk out of there a better person, a better individual. It builds character. It builds, for example, leadership qualities. It builds, on so many scales. If you're, again, my personal opinion, doing it right, the right associations and working on this, right?
Yeah.
You're just going out there chasing the money. Many people are successful because they make a lot of money, but it doesn't mean that they're fulfilled. It doesn't mean that they're, that they're happy, right? So I think there's more to it than that.
Okay, so you've alluded to how you have built in here, and you've built in here, and I mean, I can be a massive testament to that. You are literally a walking personal development book. One of my questions for you before the end of this thing is, do you have any aspirations to write the book? But before we get to that, I want to go back and say, okay, early on, you make this decision, you get brought to this awareness, you start moving forward, your actions start to match what those newfound desires are. You're moving forward, making the right decisions. What were were there any clues early on that you can remember? Any books that you read, any speakers that you saw, any truths that you discovered early on? As you were sort of on your way up the mountain, you would probably still say you're still on the way up the mountain. And that's the wonderful thing about you, is that you haven't gotten comfortable. But at the end of the day, early on, when you were just starting to build that snowball a little bit, what were some of the things that attracted you to that idea?
Well, hey, that's a great question. Mike, I remember very specifically, right? Prior to getting into the world of entrepreneurship, I had done literally zero when it comes to personal growth, right? Zero. And hence why I was at that point in my life really going nowhere, no impact, no nothing, dissatisfied, very unfulfilled in so many different scales. But I'll never forget, for example, this individual, he lent me, I'm going to age myself here a little bit. Today we got podcasts, you got everything electronic, you got like downloads and all this, but he gave me these cassette tapes, and I'll never forget those cassette tapes. That was the beginning of my journey. And the cassette tapes were from Brian Tracy, and it was called the Phoenix Seminar. I think there's a whole course on it. Probably did some copywriting that probably he probably shouldn't have done, right, on these blank tapes. But I'll tell you though, is I listened to these cassette tapes, and I had this old truck, and it was old cassette tapes in the truck, and everywhere I drove, I turned my vehicle into a university, right? I stopped listening to music. I listened to no music. And I listened to those cassette tapes over and over and over and over again until they were ruined. I couldn't listen to them anymore. They were like, some of them got damaged, and they just like, they were just, but that was the when I reflect back on like 20 plus years ago now, it was those cassette tapes that got me. It was like an aha moment. It was like, holy man, I never heard this stuff before, right?
Yeah. It's
kind of like, you've never traveled in the world, Mike, and then your first place that you go to is like Bora Bora, Four Seasons Resort, and you're staying in these over-the-water bungalows, right? I've stayed there.
Yep.
Well, it was like that. You can imagine never traveling before and then going and you just experience Bora Bora, the Four Seasons Resort, and those over-the-water bungalows. It would blow your mind, right?
Yes.
That's what it was. That's the best I could relate it to, what it did for me. And then I started getting obsessed about personal growth. Anything I could get my hands on in regards to books. Every conversation I had with people that were more successful than I was like, hey, what books do you recommend? You know, what CDs, what programs would you recommend? And I look at my career path, it's always been about books, audios, CDs, or downloads nowadays, podcasts, just like yourself, your podcast and others, and then as well as to the associations, right? I just try to really pay attention. I find it, there's always something to learn, right? The moment you think, well, I know that, the 3 worst words in the English language is that, I know that. Like the moment somebody says, I know that, you've literally capped your growth potential.
Yeah, you're closing it off. That's a closed statement. That's yep, I'm all done. I don't need any more. Many times. Yeah, it's not a healthy thing to say. That's a fantastic, that hasn't come out on our podcast so far. That's a really, really good point right there. While we're talking about books, you got somebody who is looking at themselves right now in the mirror. They're in their vehicle listening to this broadcast, and they're thinking, yeah, you know what? I'm not digging in the way I'd like to dig into this thing called life. What's a book, a speaker? What's something that you would throw at that person who just says that to you off the cuff?
Well, I think the book that pops into my mind, like I've read hundreds, if not thousands of books. So, it's hard to really pinpoint all the books that I could rattle off a bunch, but the one, if somebody is, thinking about the power of how small, slight changes can make in your life, because I've seen some people come from nothing to achieve extraordinary success over the years. And it comes down to the slight choices that you make every day. And if there's one book that I was going to say, if somebody's going to venture off, into the path of personal growth, called the Slight Edge book by Jeff Olson. Slight Edge book by Jeff Olson. That book, I read it many years ago. I always revert back to it, but it was just exactly what I did. It's just like a simple little daily things, right? It's kind of like, your podcast that you got, the first one, and then you do the second, and then you do the third. All of a sudden, it just becomes more and more natural. All of a sudden, it starts to pick up steam, right? But people miss the compounding effect. They think they miss the compounding effect of working on themselves. Warren Buffett has even said the greatest investment you will ever do in your life is not a stock. It's not a fund. It's not a whatever. The greatest investment that you'll ever do is in yourself. Right. And, so the Slight Edge book talks about that. It's the little things that you do, not all at once, that every single day. Like what I learned early on was like, just read, because prior to getting into the world of entrepreneurship, I had never read a book when I was since I left school. And even school, that was questionable, right? I would read the first half, read a little bit in the middle, read the last, if I had to do a book report, but sure. I started getting obsessed about reading and just reading. I wasn't a fast reader, just reading as little as 10 pages a day. 10 pages a day, was, you read 10 pages a day, you'll read about a book a month, 12 books a year. You've already separated yourself from 75, 80% of the population just for that. Yes. And then it's just like leading to other things, that just again, those little slight edge differences over long term compounds, right? And it compounds and it seems so insignificant. And it seems like nothing is really happening, but it's not until 3 months or 6 months or even a year, 3 years or 5 years. What I really started to notice, Mike, is when your past associations, all of a sudden you don't see them for a while, and all of a sudden you see them a year, 2 years or 3 years or 5 years later. And the thing they start saying to you is, wow, you've changed. Okay, well, I'm glad. Thank God I changed. I wouldn't want to be the same
because you haven't. I'm sorry, but you haven't changed. And
exactly.
Right? Yeah.
So it's those little things that, I started concentrating on, not doing a lot, but just every day, just those little things, right? So the Slight Edge book is one of, by Jeff Olson, was a book that, kind of alluded to that, just day in, day out. Path towards success, path towards failure. You said at the beginning, like success leaves clues. Well, failure leaves clues as well, right? And so it's understanding, for example, what those little habits that you do will lead to success, and the habits that are not serving you, what they lead you to.
Yes, I am very, very glad that you brought that up. The fact that also, like, okay, so of the people that are in my circle, people that I've met and encountered, if I had a list of the most disciplined people that I know, you would be, if not the very top, right at the very top of that list. You're an extremely disciplined man. And it makes sense that this is the book that you pull out to give people how little teeny tiny things can add up to big results over time. Now, here's the thing. You haven't always been this disciplined. You learned this. This is a skill you learned.
Yeah. And the reality is this, is that a lot of successful people, it's not, some people are more gifted in certain areas, but they still have to work at their gifts or their talents. Mm-hmm. I wasn't one of those individuals. And a lot of people that I know that are highly successful were not the most talented individuals, right? They weren't the most skilled, and a lot of and just didn't have those gifts as I mentioned. Yeah. But I think is like what you said, is those disciplines, those things can be taught, right? Skill sets can be taught. And it comes down to is when you got clarity of purpose, clarity of aim, and then clarity of a plan, then you know what you got to work at every day. But some people, and I think too, though, Mike, is some people overthink things. They go, well, I don't know exactly what I want. Well, you don't need to know everything. It's just take that first little step. What would be that first step? And trust me, I'm fairly disciplined, Mike, and I appreciate you saying those kind words, but there are some people way more disciplined than I am. I'm still working on my discipline every single, all the time. Yeah. There's so many things that I can get better at, and you look at some other people who are achieving, well, they're just more disciplined than I am. Right. And they're just doing those little things, a little bit better, a little bit more consistent. And that's the secret. Most people think it's this magical formula.
Yeah, well, you alluded to it, though. One of the other things you alluded to earlier, and I appreciate that so much, just the idea of reading 10 pages of a good book every day, that alone, you do that 3-6 months, that's 12 books in a year kind of a thing. That, what you said earlier, that puts you ahead of like 70 or 80% of people out of there. Like, that's the thing. And then combining that with, it's not necessarily the most talented people that make it. It's the people that keep their eye on the prize. And in the society that we live, and this is something that I just believe with all of my heart, it's kind of low-hanging fruit. Any guy out there that wants to change their life, if they just change their habits a little bit, they will put themselves ahead of 70 or 80% of people out there, because so many people don't do that. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. Like, just like we were just talking about, like reading a book, 10 pages. It's no different than, for example, is this things that I learned early on as well, is when you start getting into the path of growing you start looking for, and that's why I recommend that book, The Slight Edge. Look for anything that will give you a little bit of an advantage. And it's not big stuff. It seems like it's so insignificant, but it's so significant on the grand scheme of things. So I'll relate it to something like this, is like waking up a little bit earlier. Like, for example, some people, if you look at the average successful person, they'll wake up anywhere from, like, I know highly successful people are up at 4 a.m. Some are 5, some are 6, but the large majority are early risers. And, I was one of those individuals prior to that. If I'd wake up at 7 or 8 o'clock, right? Mm-hmm. And it dawned on me when I started getting into the world of growing myself and how could I get better, right? If I want the world to get better, I got to focus on getting better.
Yeah.
Then I thought to myself, man, if I just woke up a little bit earlier. Now, some people say, well, 7 o'clock to 5 o'clock is just such a big jump. Well, they just start with 15 minutes earlier. Get accustomed to that, then move it ahead another 15 minutes. But when you think about the impact of that in your life, it's beyond comprehension. And most people never even take the time to think about it or calculate it. Because think about this. For somebody who wakes up 7 o'clock versus 5 a.m.,
yeah.
That's a 2-hour advantage every day. You calculate that over, for example, even just 5 days, that's 10 hours extra a week.
Yep.
10 hours a week. That's an extra 40 hours, a month.
Yeah.
It's like you calculate that over 12 months, you've just given yourself an extra month of stuff that you could do to, whether it's grow, read, work on yourself, maybe work on that side business you've always wanted to start. Maybe it's you want to get fit. Maybe it's taking 20 minutes when you wake up and go for that walk or go for that run or whatever that is. All of it, there's just just those little things. And I learned that early on. And I thought to myself, to me, it was a no-brainer. It was like, if I could do this, what would that give me an impact over the course of my life? It was far beyond what I even comprehended at that time.
Yeah.
But it gave me an advantage, right? And so it gave me an advantage to work on me, to work on my health, to work on so many things on the business side of things. That a lot of times people don't think about that.
Well, and I think that you're setting the table for where I was going to go with the next question. The fact that you didn't just go chasing the dollar as life got a little bit more comfortable. You also started delving into yourself as to things that you wanted to do. And I go through, here's a couple phases right there. Bert, you decided to do in your late 20s, early 30s, you decided to do a bodybuilding contest. So you focused on your body and you got your body into an awesome place for the experience of it all. Then, a couple years later, it's like, okay, I've watched Bert. It's like, oh, family is now becoming the focal point. And as you have done both of those two things, you kind of put all of yourself into those things and immersed yourself in it and the experience. And I just think about life. How much greater is life when we are immersed in whatever it is that we're doing? If it's a hobby, we're immersed in it. If it's with our family, we're immersed in it. We're not distracted. We're not just looking around for the next thing or living a life of scarcity or anxiety, things like that. When you can immerse yourself into the things that you want to be or you want to grow into, doesn't that just turn life from black and white into color?
It does. It does. And I think, you kind of are talking a little bit about what I talk about as well a lot when I'm coaching, individuals, and that is that, too many times, we're doing things that doesn't bring us, for example, excitement or whatnot. So you gotta know, for example, what to eliminate. There's just too many distractions, too many things. And I think, the fastest way to live a very unfulfilling life is say yes to everything, right? Mm-hmm. Yes, people. They're people pleasers. I got to be here. Yes, 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 yes. It takes, you want to live a fulfilling life, as crazy as it sounds, you have to say no more than you say yes in a lot of cases, right? And people just have a really hard time with that. And hence why they struggle a lot of times by saying yes all the time increases stress because they're too busy doing stuff and they're not being productive. And I agree with that. I think it's, people don't evaluate on what's important, what's their priorities. Like I'm reading this book right now called Essentialism. And it's about focusing on the vital few versus the many, right? Yes. And it all comes down to that. And for myself, like I just got, certain things I want to do. I just got focused on that and eliminated everything else.
Yeah.
Right. Focused on this. And I think that's where a lot of people struggle in life as well. They think that, I look at this, Mike, and just alluding to, mental illnesses and stuff. The world today, we're inundated with so many things, from social media and people, it's unfortunate, but social media is just, you don't get the real story just based on what's on a screen.
No, that's
so
for sure.
People have this perception that, I have to go do this. I have to do this. This person is doing this, so I should do the same thing. And that's a path that's a pathway that could potentially lead to destruction, right? And it's just you get caught up in what everybody else is doing by focusing on what's to you, right?
Well, it's kind of the hyper version of being a yes man, and it's the digital version of just looking at what other people are doing and then applying it to you, saying, "Oh, this is what it's going to take to be happy." When that's not even a reality, like you said. That's people's what they want to put out there, and if we take that and start applying it to our lives, that's going to lead to that. Just a digital version of that yes man thing you were talking about.
Absolutely. Right. And so that's the thing too, is, venturing off, like, for example, whether it's in the business world, I see the mind can only handle one focus at a time. But at least for us men anyways, maybe women are women are better multitaskers than us men. Right. But when you're looking at this, is like, I find people are like, I'm a serial entrepreneur. I got this business. I got this business. I got this business. I got this business. I got this many businesses.
Yeah.
For the large majority, the most successful people that I know focused on one thing.
Yeah.
And put their heart and soul into it. Once that was built, then they could go and contribute to other things, right? Yeah. But I'm relating it to business, but it works the same thing in life. People are focused, they're distracted by this, and it's very hard to get anything accomplished or living a fulfilling life. Seeing, for example, watching everybody's, so-called great life.
Yeah. Exactly. So. I hate that time gets slippery when these cameras turn on, but time gets slippery, and so there's a couple of things I want to hit before we finish off. I alluded earlier, awareness is a huge light bulb that needs to turn on for so many of us, even those of us who have become aware of certain things. But life gets busy, and we put our head down again, and it's so important to pop that head up and be aware of things, and that's where things like journaling and there's all sorts of tools that can be done for that. The other thing was vulnerability. That's the other thing that's popped up. I want to talk about family a little bit with you, because it's been a sincere pleasure to watch your family build over the years as you've become successful on the business end of things, as you've gotten some cool personal check marks on that bucket list of things that you have done. You've also built a beautiful, beautiful family. And I want to ask you just about family a little bit, Bert. Like how important is your family to you?
My family is everything. And, just like anything though, Mike, is, when you're building a family, we have two beautiful daughters, and we go through our struggles too, but that's part of family, right?
Yep.
I grew up on a farm. My dad was very, very strong. He was verbally strong, I should say, right? So it was a tough upbringing from a mental perspective, very much so, because you're always living on edge, with stress and all of that. But I never wanted to bring that to my children. So my family is everything that I do. I mean, you have kids, they're the world, right? You'll do just about anything for your children, right? When you're dealing, with your spouse, hey, we have our ups and downs. We have good times, we have bad times. I'd be lying to you if we don't have arguments. That's part of life. Like, we have arguments. We have different views on things. We have different, perspectives, and that's what it is. We've got to work those things out. Sometimes it works out quickly. Sometimes it takes a little longer. But one thing that I've always known is, like, I'm one of those individuals who's very loyal, right? I'm like, I will, stick with something, I just love loyal people. I mean, and I've always been that. And, but my family, I love spending time with my daughters. I love spending time doing things with them. And, what I always try to remember is when you see your kids, right, it brings that kid in you.
Yep.
And, a lot of things that they see, that they experience, I haven't got to remember they're experiencing this for the first time, right? Yeah. They're seeing this for the first time. It's kind of like when my daughters were really young. Now they're 7 and 5, still young, but I'm talking about when they're first seeing things. They first experience of going on a plane. They first experience, all these things. And I just kind of gets me reflecting on how precious life is and how quickly life goes by. And I always knew life goes by fast.
Yep.
But I never realized how fast it goes by until I started having kids.
Yes.
Because it was just like yesterday, I was holding my daughters, and they're just tiny, in my hands. Meanwhile, now they're like, 7'5".
Yeah.
And, with a flicker, it's going to, they're going to be in their teenage years. And then they're going to be 18 and going on their, in their own way. And life is way too precious. And, even still to this day, Mike, I even have to catch myself, right? Because you can get caught up, like we talked about earlier, distractions.
Yep.
So, you get caught up, you're getting caught up with, these things or whatever. And then you're at home, you just got to try to be present, be present with them. And one of the things that I try to do with my girls if I'm not traveling or on the road is like, I tuck them in bed. If I get home early enough, I'll tuck them in bed and read to them, or we meditate together. They're like, Papa, can we meditate tonight? Okay, let's do a quick little meditation, right? I have this little meditation app and we meditate, try to get them, thinking, ask them about their days. And one thing that I've always learned, with my girls and, I want to teach them, I ask them specific questions every night. How was your day?
Yep.
What was the best part of your day? What did you learn today? And I always ask too, because I want them to understand that there's nothing wrong with making mistakes and failure. So I always ask, what mistakes did you make today? What did you fail at today? Right? I want them to know that making mistakes and making failures is a part of the process of life, that, you can't avoid making mistakes. I mean, you don't want to make any mistakes. You don't want to fail in anything. Then just do nothing, be nothing. Right?
Yep.
Don't ever try anything new. And so I want them to experience the blessings of their day. Also, for example, but also ask them, okay, what did you fail at today? What mistakes you make? I want them to know that it's okay to do that, and then to learn from that. So then I ask, what did you fail at today? Well, I failed at this, or I made this mistake. Okay. So now learn from this. And are you going to do that mistake again? No, I'm not going to do that mistake. So I see it's okay to make mistakes. What's not okay is to make the same mistake over and over and over again. Right. And I want them to learn that. So I really try to have those conversations I didn't have, with my parents when I was that age.
Yep.
I want to get them to that level of thinking and awareness. Teaching really in a nutshell, Mike, and I'll leave it at this, teach them on how to think versus what to think.
Right.
Yes. And it's one of the greatest things I believe you could teach your children. And so my daughters are always like, asking, my oldest is like, for just making decisions. Should I wear this or should I wear this? So she's always asking, we're working with her constantly is like, well, which one do you like the best? Well, I kind of like this one. Okay, well, great. That's a great decision. I want them to make their own decisions.
Yeah.
Right. Learn to make the decisions and not needing approval from everybody. So.
I love this so much. I hate that we have to end this soon, but we do. And so we're going to bring it back because I think what you said is extremely important for us. And I mean, when you talk about how you do this with your kids, I think there's a lot of dads out there who will think, oh man, that's gold. I got to do that with my family. I've got to be present like that. I've got to be able to talk about not just the what, but the how and the why of how we live our lives. And it seems so natural to do it for our kids. We should also do it for ourselves. Like I think about journaling. I think about all the the power that comes with that. And I mean, you've got so many tools in your tool belt when it comes to that. But journaling, isn't that what that is? Like going through the day, talking about the things that we have done, the things we're grateful for, the things that we maybe missed the mark, and how we don't want to do that. That presence, I mean, isn't that the key to life for us too? Like, it's so easy to think about it for our kids, but we got to cut ourselves some slack, and maybe those are skills that can help us moving forward too.
I you know what, you nailed it on the head. Is, I'll give you a challenge I had. You say I'm disciplined, but I feel I still have so much more to, I can be so much more disciplined.
Yeah,
right?
But that's because you compare yourself to David fucking Goggins. I mean, come on, like you
or the Rock, Dwayne Johnson,
right?
Those guys are another level of discipline, right? But you want to know something is this. I'll tell you, I never did much journaling. I never did any journaling before I got into this business. But sometimes you feel like, and I was always, I don't know if people feel the same on this or not, but I was always, I don't know, I made it more complicated than I needed to. Right. It was like, whether it was intimidating or something, I don't know why, it was just in my head. Yep. But until I found there's a, and you're probably aware of him, a guy by the name of Tim Ferriss, right? Yeah. Tim Ferriss, he has a great podcast as well. I've listened to him, several times, but he recommended one time, he recommended a journal called the 5-Minute Journal.
I've gone through 2 of them. They're fantastic. Yep.
And I was like, so simple, just 3 point, makes it easy. And it's just enough to just get you aware, reflecting, and all of this. And I thought I'd add that. Maybe some of your viewers, you might have mentioned many times before, but the 5-Minute Journal was one of those things that it was very simple to do, easy to do. But you're right, we just don't do it.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. Our crew member that's here too, he's actually just gone, he's about halfway through his first time going through it. And he's just nodding as you're saying that. Yep. Yeah. 5-Minute Journal is pretty awesome. It is. It's super awesome. For the viewers and listeners, just a real quick, all it is it's a quick, what would make today great? You write down those 3 things, you write down something good about yourself, you start your day. Doesn't take long at all. At the end of the day, you write down 3 things that went well during the day. What could have made today better? The act of writing those things down, just there's something about that. And then, like you said earlier, though, the little decision that is repeated over and over and over again, you do that for about a month, and you notice suddenly when you become aware again, you look around, you're like, oh my God, my life is changing a little bit. And it has to do with these teeny tiny habits. I got to ask you this because we're over time here, and I'm going to kind of finish with this here. But at the end of the day, if you were to write a personal development book, Bert, and let me tell you this, I mean, I know you don't think, okay, you go down on yourself for not being as disciplined as you'd like to be or whatever. For us guys who have watched you, we look at you and we think that you're a phenom, okay? And we do. And you need to know that. You need to know that you have inspired a lot of people, people you don't even necessarily know you inspired. My eldest, he's about to do a bodybuilding contest. He's 31. He's at the perfect age to do it. Everything's okay with his wife and his daughter now from a health perspective. So he's going to go do it. He's going to do that because 10 years ago, you sat with him when you had just finished yours and you talked to him about it. He was so inspired by it. And to this day, you're one of the guys that has inspired him to do that. You're an inspiring guy, Bert. I got to ask you, if you were to write a personal development book, what would you focus it on? What are some of the things? What are some of the nuggets that you would kind of throw into that book? Take us home for our viewers and our listeners. What are some of the things that that mean so much to you that you'd write them down?
Yeah. Well, I honestly, I would probably focus on my strengths, the things which would all be about just kind of like what we talked about today. The little daily, seemingly insignificant, little habits, behaviors, routines. I think I'd probably talk about, I don't know, maybe if I look at my life, there's many people who had significantly greater hardships than I have. We all have hardships. We all have, for example, challenges, some more significant than others. I would say, I can't say mine are as significant as what others people go through. I mean, there's so many inspiring people, what they've overcome. But I would probably write, a book in regards to that, in regards to, hey, listen, it doesn't matter where you're at in your life. The daily things can lead to a completely different life.
Yeah.
And, but you just got to be, I'm a firm believer in regards to two things. One is commitment. You want a better life, then you got to commit to having a better life. And two is consistency. So commitment and consistency. You got to you got to make the decision and commit to that decision of whatever you want. If you want to grow you want to start that business, you want a better family life, whatever it is, you want to get financially set, whatever that is, you got to commit to it. Nothing great comes without full commitment.
Yeah.
Then the second thing is doing it consistently every day. People think that they got to do these massive things every day. It's the small wins that will always lead to the big wins. And, that's why I recommended that book, because anybody, if you got viewers here that are listening and they want to have a more fulfilling life, they want to achieve something, like, you said he wants to do a bodybuilding competition. Well, I'll tell you that bodybuilding competition is one of the toughest things that I did.
Mm-hmm.
But it was like every day, just sticking to the routine. It was dull. It was boring. It was mentally draining. It was physically draining. But I'll tell you, it's like, you always got to think with the end in mind. And why do I say this? Because if you're committed at something and you're consistent at something, and you do it consistently, you eliminate the negotiating mind. You're not negotiating anymore. You're not negotiating whether I should do this or shouldn't do this. Should I, for example, if you're doing a bodybuilding competition, well, you have the date set, right? You have the date set. Yep. So you just know, like, hey, you're not pushing that date. That date is happening. I know for myself, when I did it, I was like, man, I didn't want to be that guy that's on stage where everybody's looking at and saying, that guy shouldn't be there. That was motivation, right? I kept reminding myself of that, right? So I would probably write a book in regards to the struggles, just the regular struggles that, people go through. We all go through challenging times. We go through obstacles, but those things are all part of our journey. Those things are part of who we become. And you can look at it as something that is negative, something that is but it's part of you, and it's put in front of you to help you become the person that you're meant to become. And I've always been a firm believer, is like, every time I faced a challenge, a struggle, I always think the big man upstairs, and I'm not going to get into what that,
Yeah, it's different for everybody. Whatever that means to you. Yeah.
Whatever that means to you.
Yep.
Would not put that in front of you unless they didn't think that you couldn't handle it.
Yep.
Right. And that's just kind of how my approach is. So I would probably, it would be around those things.
I hate that I have to end this, but I have to end this. Bert, you're an inspiration to me. You always will be an inspiration to me. As we grow this thing, there are many times where I ask that question. When I have mentors in my life who I think about, I put them in the shoes that I'm in. And I say, okay, what would a guy like Bert do? And I do that. You're one of those people that I do that with. And I just, I don't know if you knew that or not, but you certainly are. I appreciate the fact that you have been so giving with your time. You've been so vulnerable and just an open book when it comes to this stuff. I certainly hope this isn't the last time that we do this. Thank you very much for opening up who you are to the He Changed It audience here. It's very, very appreciated on our end. And I wish you the most success. You certainly deserve it for all the effort that you have put in, all the learning that you have done, and the people's lives who you've changed. And we didn't really get into that, but you've changed a lot of people's lives too. Thank you for being who you are, Bert.
Hey, Mike, it is a pleasure. And thank you for having me. And hey, listen, you know what you're doing right now, creating this awareness and interviewing many people. I know you've been doing this for last, year, 2 years now. And It's a great thing. It takes courage to go start something like this. Right. And because not a lot of people, for example, many people are good at starting something, but there's not a lot of people that are good at like continuing it or finishing it. So appreciate everything that you do on HeCast and raising that level of awareness. And it was my pleasure to joining you today. I love our conversations, and hey, this is a gift of yours. And I hope that you continue, and I'm sure that you will. because I think it can make a great impact for people who are out there, right?
Oh, thanks, boy. That means a lot to me. From one guy who's married to a massive force of nature Spitfire of a wife to another one who's also married to a force of nature of a wife. Candy and I give our best to Nancy and your family. We just appreciate you guys so much, and can't wait for our paths to cross again. Thanks, bud.
Absolutely. To you and Candace and your family as well. Appreciate you.
They go by that quick. That's another episode of HeCast in the can. Once again, if you haven't downloaded the He app from HeChangedIt, what are you waiting for? Go to HeChangedIt.com. The links are all there for each of the stores. If you haven't downloaded or if you haven't shared or subscribed to the podcast yet, please do that. We would appreciate it very much. We got a lot of good stuff coming down the pipe. And I just am really grateful for those early adopters who jumped on board with us and have been with us the entire way. If this is your first one, welcome. We are excited to have you here. That is another episode of HeCast, the official podcast of HeChangedIt. My name is Mike Chisholm. Go change something.